Alright, so Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny Master Exploder. I've always thrown this at my students who I thought maybe could handle a little bit of a strumming slash bar chord challenge. So it starts with an E bar. It's going to be an A form bar chord, but technically it's an E major chord. And normally, with this shape, you would take your first finger and butt it in the string above it to keep it quiet. But since it's on an E note and we've got a low E note, any chord that you play off of this location, 7th fret, if that's the root note, you can just leave the low E exposed if you want the lower sound. So first finger and then third finger flat over the next 3 strings, 1, 3, 3, 3. Make sure you got a back bend at that third finger knuckle right there, otherwise it won't work. And then also that flare up allows your third finger to mute out the high E string. So in total, open 1, 3, 3, 3, and then tick. Okay, now here's the strum pattern. Yeah, so strum pattern 1 E and a 2 E and a 3. Again, 2, 3, 4, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3. Let's loop that. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3, 4, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3, 4. See how shallow my strum is? If you're gonna do it that quick, you can't be this wide. It just doesn't work. So the other thing I'm doing you can't see is I'm taking my pinky finger and I'm kind of just gently tethering it to the high E string. That keeps, again, everything tethered, so you're not going to go too wide with it. And real loose in the wrist. Okay, then after that we're going 1 E and a, it was 1 E and a 2 E and a 3. Then we need a 4 E and a on the low E string. 4 E and a. And see how my hand was moving over this way while I was doing that? With a down, up, down, up. And then we're going to head to the next chord. So this is a E form G chord that rocks down to a C bar chord. And this is an E form, right? And this is an A form. It's an E form because if we reduce it all the way to the nut, it's an E chord. It's an A form because if we reduce it all the way to the nut, it's an A chord. So we're going G, C, G. And there's some mechanics, there's some specific mechanics that you want to do with this. And a lot of it has to do, with your wrist. So when you're on the E form bar chord, see how you see that my wrist just kicked out to the left or towards the nut. So the wrist kicks out towards the nut like a swivel. And see what happens to the ring finger when you do that. When you kind of, here's one way you can do it is take and put your finger on your wrist like that when you're on the E form bar chord and just push the whole thing to the left and see how it just flattens out. It kind of smears out diagonally into that A form, right? Like that. Last thing you want to do is like pick this whole thing up and then try to reform this. It takes too long. So it's quicker to cock it out to the left and then cock it back to the right. Right, slower. Right, E form, A form, back to E form. Then we're headed to an A form D chord. This one, unlike the other one we started with, you do want to make sure the index finger butts into the low E string. Because we don't want to hear that low E. It would change the chord into a D with an E in the bass, which we're not looking for right now. So in total, tick, let's butt it up from underneath, and then first finger. See, I've got that first finger right up behind the fret, not in the middle of the fret. Whenever you can, close the distance. You get a better sounding note, and you don't have to, you don't have to press as hard. All right, then same thing, especially with a bar. So the ring finger, if you can get it, not here. If you see a 1/4 inch, a space in between the ring finger and that metal strip, try to close the distance. And again, that back bend at the knuckle is necessary. If you're seeing this and you're like, my finger won't do it, take your other finger and smash it. Just push down right there and flatten it out. Yeah. And your thumb has to be on the back of the neck for this. Roughly in between the first finger and the ring finger. So tick. And then 1, 3, 3, 3. And again, that flare up of the ring finger causes a tick on the high E string. Yeah, so we were coming from here, G, C, with the cock out of the wrist, back to the G, and then D. Now this rolls up. So yeah, these two forms have a really special relationship to each other. And if you don't mechanically perform it correctly, you're going to slow yourself down So when you're on this A form bar chord, you want to swivel the wrist back in to the right. So it's about here. Yeah, swivel it back in. But what you really want to see is this ring finger roll up onto the A string. You don't want to pick this whole thing up and position it on top of the A string. You want it to roll by swiveling the wrist so it rolls right, and which means it's positioned high enough so that it can do that. Right? If you're pushing your wrist forward, if you're rolling forward, you end up in between. It's too low. If you end up here, I don't know what went wrong, but anyway, you want to practice going back and forth between these two chords with that wrist movement and the roll of the ring finger. Okay, so that was D, rolls up to A, right? And then from A, we're gonna do this chromatic thing. It's gonna be A sharp, and then we're headed to B, but you're gonna get to B via a slide, so it's gonna be a strum on A strum on A sharp, strum A sharp again to slide it to B. And I don't think hardly anybody realizes this is in the Tenacious D riff. When I first learned it, I heard it as just straight across. But no, it's A sharp, hit A sharp again to slide. Again. Okay, so now the whole thing again, the E with a low exposed D. The low E string. G, C, G. To D. And then the chromatic climb. Alright, let's do it with that first count. 1 E and 2 E and 3. 4 E and G, C, G, D, A sharp slide. And that's about it. Have at it, and good luck.